So today, we're going to have the third talk of our last module. And so we'll focus on designing online surveys and we'll focus on those that are related to health. The presentation will cover some best practices and also talk about some methodological considerations and ethical considerations as well. And this is our outline. So the goal of this presentation is that at the end, you, the learner, should be able to understand the principles of designing effective online surveys. You should be able to identify some best practices for structuring and visualizing your survey questions. Apply some of these techniques to enhance the user's experience and ensure data quality. You should also be able to recognize the importance of ethical considerations when you're designing online surveys. And lastly, at the end of this talk, you should be able to implement these practical strategies for building your own online surveys. So what's an online? What do we mean by online surveys? So this is very simple. It basically means digital tools for collecting data from participants on the internet. And some of the commonest tools that are out here, we have Google Forms. I'm sure most of you are familiar with them. We have Microsoft Forms. We have RedCap. As mentioned last week, this is one of the most robust digital tools for health data collection. And then we have a commercial tool called SurveyMonkey. So these are there are many different ones, but I'm just highlighting the four key ones. On this side of the screen, this is a screenshot of Google Forms. So this is a survey that we ran last year at the end of this very program, and we did it on Google Forms. So this is an example of an online survey. So now let's compare traditional versus online surveys. Before the advent of the internet, people have been doing surveys, and they used to do it by sending people papers by mail or sending people to come to your door. But online kind of stepped in and helped in multiple ways. So we are going to compare the traditional ways that surveys have been done versus the online ways that they are being done now by different aspects. And the first aspect is cost. For traditional surveys, it was really more costly because you have to print the data, you have to print the questionnaires, you have to mail them to someone, or you have to hire field staff who are going to go maybe to offices or to houses or wherever the participants are to administer them in person. But this is drastically cut down by online surveys. And you, of course, expect the cost to be very much lower because you are deploying this by basically just clicking, and then someone is able to open it on their own computer, on their phone, complete it, and submit. So the cost is remarkably lower. And this is one of the reasons you might want to consider online surveys. The second one is in terms of reach. So traditionally, with the paper-based surveys, you are kind of limited to a certain particular geographical area and to a particular population. But with the internet, you can reach more and more people. So the potential number of people that you could survey is really huge. So online surveys have a very huge reach. There is something that it's ongoing. Maybe you've received it in your email where you just kind of receive an email asking you to participate in a survey. So people are able to do email mining by looking at corresponding author fields from journals, extracting emails and names from there, and then emailing like millions of people. So often get a lot of such emails. And that's something that if you were running a survey of that nature, you could use data mining and you really send your survey to a lot of researchers. And so the online surveys really increase the potential reach. The third item is the time to collect data. Because for traditional surveys, you have to print papers, take them in person somewhere. It's definitely going to take weeks to months. Well, online surveys is easy. You deploy with a click, right? Once you've set up the form and you deploy them with a single click. So this is often in real time, or it takes just a couple of days for you to be able to collect really huge amounts of data. The fourth item is the response rate. With traditional surveys, the response rate is often lower due to manual engagement. Because you have to go convince someone. It's not as convenient as with the online. And I think it's much better user experience to allow people to fill these surveys by themselves. And also, you have a lot of the processes that are engaged in the survey automated in the online scenario, unlike in the manual traditional survey systems. The next is flexibility in design. Once you've printed your forms in traditional survey methods, it is very hard for you to change them because now you have to probably reprint everything. So these surveys are not really flexible. They are quite static, and the changes are very difficult to implement. Unlike in online surveys, if a change is a trivial one, you can just basically edit the form and then you deploy, which makes it very easy for you to make updates. And lastly, in terms of data processing, with the traditional surveys, you have to collect the data on paper and then try to enter it on a digital form. And this introduces a lot of manual data errors. And unlike the online surveys where someone is entering it directly into the database, for almost all of these online survey platforms like Google Form, you can even just see the summary for each of the fields directly in the back end as people are entering it. You can really just see the data coming in. So that's it for the comparison between the traditional surveys and the online surveys. Let's move forward. Let's now look at some of the principles that you should have in mind as you plan to design surveys. And I'm going to outline 6 different principles that could make you design game-changing surveys. The first is that you have to be user-centric. You have to have the user in mind. Understand your audience, and you must think about what language do they really understand, what's their level of education, where are they, and by having your end user in mind, you're going to be designing something that is appropriate for them, something that they are going to be able to understand and are more likely to respond to it. So always start with the user. Who is your user? What's their level of education? What is their primary language? Where are they located? How can I communicate effectively with them? What's their level of computer literacy? All those characteristics that define the user have to be understood really early on in the design process. So always think about the user right from the outset. Secondly, you have to ensure clarity and simplicity. Try as much as possible to avoid ambiguity. So you do this by using very clear and concise questions. As Antoinette said last week, we also have to avoid double barrel or leading questions. So see this example here. Someone might design their survey in such a way that they ask this as, do you think healthcare is affordable and accessible? So these are kind of 2 questions. So it's a double barrel question. And so an improved version will be you have to separate it where you just say, do you think healthcare is affordable? And then for the accessibility question, you put it probably as the next question. The third design principle is logical flow. Logical flow is very important because it makes it easy for the participant, and you also ensure some kind of higher levels of response and completeness of your forms. So the advice is that you start with general questions, questions that are quite easier for someone to answer. Then you proceed to those that are more specific, like specific but also easier. I could ask social history, some life questions. And for questions that are quite sensitive, you want to take them really at the end of the survey. Like, for example, asking about someone's income, they might be shy or really not comfortable answering that question, or their mental health or their sexual behavior, those kind of questions is really advised that you push them to the end of the form. So the fourth principle is to ensure consistency in the format of your questions. So try to use consistency in terms of the scales. If you are using like a Likert scale, try to use a Likert scale all through. If you can do that, it's easier for the participants to kind of know how to respond to the questions because they're kind of just seeing it presented in a very similar way as the previous ones. And always ensure to include very clear instructions for each section. Here's an example. So we have a Likert scale here from 1 to 5, right from not engaged to highly engaged. And you can see that the instruction makes it very clear for the reader to understand what to do. It says, rate the level of engagement and interactivity during sessions on a scale from 1, which is not engaged, to 5, highly engaged. This makes it very much easier. And if you are going with the Likert scale, try as much as possible to use it for other questions. The fifth principle is minimize survey fatigue. I'm sure if you have completed an online form, you would have had this experience where the longer the form, the more you want to give up. So you should not exceed 10 to 12 minutes. Ideally, if you can design your survey in such a way that it is like 5 to 7 minutes, that will really be really good because the user is going to have a great experience. So you do this by breaking long sections into smaller, more manageable chunks. Let's look at this example. You can see the way that we did this in this survey. We broke the questionnaire into really quite a good number of sections. So you can see this is section 3 of 15. And on this side, you can see another 2 questions here falling under the same topic. So this is very helpful because you can also group the questions by section, making the user have a better experience by addressing questions that are similar under one section before they proceed to the next. Another advantage of organizing it in sections is that as you move across sections, it kind of already automatically saves the data, which helps in such a way that if someone drops out midway, you still have some. The last principle is you have to pilot your survey. You don't just develop the survey and then you just deploy it to everyone. This piloting is very important. So what you want to do is you pick a small group of people and try to make this group representative. So you think about all your possible participants and you sample from there. You have some diversity in your sample. And by piloting, you are going to identify questions that are quite unclear and are ambiguous. And you also want to test for technical functionality. You don't want to deploy to everyone, then notice that, oh, maybe there are spelling errors, maybe a question is not very clear. So by piloting with a small group, you are going to get early feedback on both the quality of the questions and on some technical aspects like navigation, clicking next, does it really work, responsiveness across devices, and so on. So these are the 6 principles that I think if you implement, you're going to design surveys that are remarkably much better. The next component of our presentation will look at the visual design itself. You've been using mobile apps and you know through your own direct experience that apps that are poorly designed are not so appealing and they are quite difficult to use. So why should it be difficult for online surveys? These are basically web pages. And so design is something that I personally take very serious. And I encourage that everyone takes it serious in their development process for online surveys. And this is important because aesthetic appeals to everyone. So use clean, appealing designs to enhance the user experience because this drives engagement. Thank God a lot of these platforms that permit us to do online surveys already have templates. So if you are not having very good design skills, you can just look at examples of surveys and borrow the color patterns from there and the structuring. You don't need to invent the wheel. The second component is responsiveness. Responsiveness means that if you design a form, if you use it on a desktop and then you move to a tablet and then to a phone, the the design should be able to cascade, right? You can see here, it kind of looks well. It's not cropped on the tablet. As you move to smaller devices, it kind of still fits on the screen. Another good thing about current online platforms is that it kind of does this for you automatically. So if you open like a Google form on your phone, you'll see that it is automatically very responsive, fits directly into the screen. But if you have challenges putting that in place, you should consider spending more time. And this can be difficult if you have some kind of questions or you're putting images in a field. They might cover more space than you need. So always think about the different devices that the user is going to be accessing your questionnaire from. How are they going to see it? In your design and piloting phase, test for responsiveness. Make sure that it is well presented across different devices. The last component of visual design is include visual aids. They really help. Sometimes if you have like images, infographics that will help clarify your question better, try to use them, but don't overuse them because they can make the questionnaire really lengthy and difficult for the readers to go through. So let's now look at some methodological considerations that are very key for designing effective online surveys. The first will be data management and security. There's a lot of concerns around this. And the first, which I think is very critical, and we'll see aspects of it again in the ethical considerations part of this talk, which is encryption. Encryption means that you want to ensure that third parties cannot breach the data transfer from your device right to the database or the server where you're keeping it. So encryption helps to protect data not only at the collection phase, but how it's transferred to the database and how it is stored. So you ensure encryption at all levels possible. And one of the ways that you can quick ways if you're ever doing anything online that involves entering data on a form, always check whether there is an SSL certificate. So if you go up here on your browser, there is something here that looks like a settings button. If you click it, you have this drop-down box which can tell you whether that website is secured. This gives you a hint whether there is encryption on that platform. So this is very important. Almost never enter your data on any form that is not having this. And most of the hacking strategies that mimic some pages and try to get your online details like your username and your password. Some of the things that they do a lot is they never have this SSL certificate. Another way that you can know is to look at the beginning of your URL. So this hypertext transfer protocol should end with an S, which indicates secured. So always check. Don't if you the nice thing about modern browsers like Chrome and the rest is that if it doesn't have an SSL certificate, it will often just put a caution sign here. But people can find ways to evade that. So always make sure that there is some form of encryption as you're entering it. The second is access control. Who can access the data? You must think very carefully about this and always ensure, double check that not everyone has the right to be able to manipulate the form, the right to be able to access the data. The people who are completing the forms should just be able to see and enter data. So always take access control very seriously. The third aspect is vulnerability. You have to check constantly to ensure that maybe hackers have not bypassed or breached your encryption, or maybe someone else cannot just log in and access it. So this is a continuous process. You have to ensure all along. The second methodological consideration is avoiding multiple responses. For the traditional surveys, you can just pull up to someone's house and you give them a form. I know this face, and I've given you this form before. I'm not going to give you the same form again. So at least that's easy in the traditional sense. Or I've been to this office. If I'm going there again, this is another response. For online, it's hard because someone can enter the form and then enter it again. So you have to think of creative ways that you can solve this problem. And this is a very big problem and big challenge with online surveys because one participant can fill the form 10 times, and then you think these are 10 participants, but it's just one participant repeating the entry. There are ways that you can avoid this. So if you are not, if you are survey, you should always try to avoid collecting, identifying information. But in surveys that are very low risk, confidentiality is not it's not very important. You might want to collect emails, which can help you filter in ensuring that you have one email per participant. You can also try to put quotes. And one way that you can do that is by auto-generating quotes into a field in the database. Another way to avoid this multiple response problem is to try to design your form and set settings in such a way that you block by IP address in such a way that if someone enters it from their device, they cannot be able to enter to complete the form again. And an IP address is basically like an address on the internet that each device has. So you can think about it like if a house has a mailing address, and someone wanted to send information to a mail to that house, they send based on that address. The IP address is a similar thing for your device. Every device that you connect to the internet has its own IP address. So you can block and design the form in such a way that each respondent only has the opportunity to fill the form once from that IP address or from that device. Another interesting one is to prevent bots from filling in automatically completing the form. You can introduce the captcha. I'm sure everyone is very familiar with these captchas. The third methodological consideration is your sampling and survey distribution strategies. So sample size. For all studies, you must think about the sample size. And you should calculate an adequate sample size based on your study objectives and statistical power. How many people do you need to be confident to interpret your results in a reliable way? And since surveys are technically just cross-sectional studies, this Cochrane or Lorentz formula for calculating sample size is kind of the go-to formula for most surveys. So always ensure that you are aiming for an adequate sample size and you are sufficiently powered to kind of be able to do the kind of statistical analysis and infer results. The second thing you must think about is how are you going to reach your users? You have the survey in your computer. How are you going to send it to the target population? You could do this through several methods. Since it's an online survey, you could use emails, you can use social media platforms, you could use SMS for reaching participants. And you could use WhatsApp. If you're on WhatsApp, you could use target WhatsApp groups. So one of the things that we like to do oftentimes is identify at least one person in typical WhatsApp group so we can just kind of make a screen around and ask for people who know the participants and they send us a contact of maybe an admin or someone in the WhatsApp group. And when it's time to deploy, we can ask them to kindly share the link in their group. If you have an email list, like at CRENC, we have an email list of more than 1,000 people. You can automatically send an email to all of those participants. You can equally do this manually, which is very painful to identify each person and then send them an email. And if your sample size is like 1,000 people, it means that you have to manually email 1,000 people, which is very hard. And so you have to think about how you are going to reach these participants early on and probably start finding the right channels through which you will push your questionnaire. I gave an example earlier of how people are using data mining to find emails of participants from their journal correspondence, data, metadata. That's another potential one if your target group is in that is in that area. And another thing is you can use ads. This is a very nice one. In 2020, we did a survey, a nationwide survey, when COVID just started. We wanted to know the knowledge, attitude, and practices of people. And we deployed this through Facebook ads, Twitter ads, and it was quite huge. We collected data for more than 7,000 people in like 3 days. And we designed ads on Facebook, and these ads are often cheap. So you could pay like $10 per week, and you can run this for 2 weeks, or you can run aggressively where you pay that per day. So this is one way that you can reach it. And then you must also think about specific groups. I gave an example of WhatsApp groups, but if you are targeting particular organizations, you might want to reach out to that organization and their IT. They could help you with an email list that you could automatically send emails to. So let's now move to ethical considerations. You know, people are very, this is one area that I'm shocked that people don't pay particular attention to. People treat surveys like they are not covered by some ethical considerations. And almost all surveys that have been shared with me locally, I've not seen the people who are designing it incorporate these ethical principles in their deployment strategies. And so let's look at informed consent. Just like how you would do informed consent in the traditional sense or for traditional in-person research, there have to be a way that you can achieve informed consent on the online surveys method. And this informed consent is really important because we try to abide by. And this ensures that the participants are participating voluntarily. So you are not coercing them, they are joining voluntarily, which is critical. And this process also ensures that you clarify the purpose, the risk, and what you will do with the data, which is what you usually outline on your information sheet. And then what you also describe once you're in your informed consenting process. Of course, it will ensure that you do not enroll someone who is not sufficiently involved. And so, how can you achieve this? You have to use simple language that is very clear, unambiguous, and you present the consent form really at the beginning so that someone can read and understand. You provide summary and details to a full link. It's hard for you to put all the data on the information sheet on that page. And I'll show you an example. You also use check boxes for someone to be sure that they really agree. So this is a very short form that I made to elucidate this point very well. So this is kind of a summary of the summary of your study. So you want to have something like this at the beginning of your survey. You give the person an idea of how long it takes. You have to be very clear that the participation is voluntary and it's anonymous. These are very tied to the Belmont principles, right? And the ethical principles. You have to make sure that people are aware that their participation is voluntary and that it's going to be anonymous, at least to protect their data. You say a little bit about what the study is. You can give the eligibility criteria and you give the patient's rights. And then you must include a full link here so that they can click and have more detail. And you enforce checklists so that they can confirm that they have read the information both and the one in the link. They understand what it means and that their participation is voluntary and they agree to take part. And then they kind of click a button either next or submit so that they can proceed. So this is one way that you can effectively ensure informed consenting in deploying online surveys. Let's look at the next ethical consideration, privacy and confidentiality. This is also very critical for you to protect personal health information of the participants. So you want to anonymize the data as much as possible. You use secure and encrypted platforms, and you use access rules very carefully to limit access to the data and the editable forms only to participants that you need. And one of the key regulations you have to be aware of when it comes to online surveys, the HIPAA compliance. So this is a US regulatory framework that ensures that patient data, whether in electronic health records or in digital form, is highly protected. And Cameroon has something similar, which is enshrined in the law. We have a Digital Data Act. And so there are actually legal penalties if you do not try to ensure this compliance. The HIPAA compliance is the go-to because it really is designed with online data collection in mind. And so it has as key principle protecting health information. And what they consider health information here is both unique identifying characteristics, like someone's phone number, their address, and so on, or individual health information. This could be their personal information that they are going to share on the form. You must do everything possible to protect that. So what are some of the best practices? You should avoid collecting people's names unless required. I'll even say don't try to collect people's names unless maybe you are doing an organizational survey among your staff or something like that. And if you have to try to find a way that you can store this identifying information separately and more securely, try to use password protected storage, both for where your data is and for your servers and so on. And get IRB approval. Get IRB approval. This is very important. So the last ethical consideration would be the right to withdraw. You must provide participants options to skip questions or to withdraw from your survey without penalties. This is a very key ethical principle. People must always know that their participation is voluntary and they can leave at any time and they can skip questions as they want. So you implement this by ensuring skip patterns, so you can put an option like prefer not to answer. And then you can provide like a link at the end of the survey for someone to exit, like an exit button. They can just close if they don't want. People should have that option. And there should be a statement in your information form and in your summary, and like in the example that I showed, that they are free to withdraw at any time. And you should avoid using forced answers. Like here, you can see fields too much. You put a lot of required fields. It's not very ethical. People should have the choice to really decline not answering a question. Now, before as we come to the end of the talk, it's nice that we kind of compare some of the four key platforms for online surveys that we have. And we have Google Forms, we have Microsoft Forms, we have RedCap, and we have SurveyMonkey. And these are I will look at them from different key aspects. The first will be the ease of use. Google Forms are very easy. You don't need to have any technical knowledge to set up a form. Similarly, Microsoft Forms are also quite easy and intuitive, particularly if you are using Microsoft 365. RedCap is really quite more difficult, right? It's like the hardest amongst all of them. And then SurveyMonkey is extremely easier compared to all because it's really a commercial tool and designing for maximum user experience. In terms of cost, Google Forms is free. Microsoft Forms comes with the Microsoft 365 plan, so you have to have that before you can access it. RedCap is an open source platform and is free for non-profit and academic users. SurveyMonkey is paid, and so there is kind of a tiered pricing model. In terms of customizability or how much you can modify it, Google Form doesn't have that much flexibility, but you can change the theme, the colors, and so on. Microsoft Forms is better than Google Forms. RedCap is highly flexible, where you can really do a lot, put skip patterns and complex stuff. And SurveyMonkey also has a lot of extensive customization. You can put your own logo, you can brand it in the way you want. In terms of security and compliance, Google Form offers some encryption, but it's not very, very strong. It's quite HIPAA compliant, but not at the highest level. And also, Microsoft Forms have also basic encryption. They are GDPR compliant. GDPR is European Union's own regulation rules. And then RedCap has the highest level of security. You have to know that RedCap was actually designed for health and medical, for research purposes. So they already put that in it. SurveyMonkey, because it's also commercial, they are aiming to also have that addressed very well. So it also has quite high level of security. In terms of integration with other tools, Google Forms connects directly with Google Sheets. So you can export your data and download it as a CSV file or some other spreadsheet file format. Microsoft Forms integrates very well with Excel, with Microsoft Teams, with Power BI. RedCap integrates well with even statistical tools like R, SPSS. And SurveyMonkey integrates with Slack, Excel, and other tools. The last component is the best use case. So when are each of these more suitable than the other? For if you're looking for simple surveys, small scale projects, just go for Google Forms. Like for example, the survey that we did here to assess you guys' perception about this program. You could do that with Google Forms. If you are using Microsoft Forms within an organization and you're doing like educational surveys, they're quite helpful. RedCap for massive scale health surveys, clinical studies. So if you are doing serious research, you should do this on RedCap. And SurveyMonkey will work very well for professional surveys and large scale projects. So what are the key takeaways from this talk? Always ensure a user-centric design. Know your user. Design surveys, ensuring that they are simple, ensuring clarity, logical flow, and because these things enhance the respondents' engagement and the quality of data that you eventually get. Ethical and secure data management is very critical because it builds trust. So you must think about how to protect privacy throughout. So you must ensure informed consenting, encryption, and compliance with HIPAA or GDPR rules. Lastly, ensure to use effective methodology because this really makes you get the best results. So employ the best practices like some of the ones that are suggested here, including practices such as how are you going, what is your sampling frame, how are you going to get to them, ensuring piloting, distributing in the right channels, and using suitable tools to ensure accurate and actionable insights. These are some further resources that you can get to be able to get more enlightened on the topic. So thank you for your keen attention.